Back with a 7-round mock draft here for the Kansas City Chiefs through the PFF mock draft simulator. And we have 8 picks, and then there are 6 UDFAs on this mock draft. Beginning with round 1, pick 31, Luther Burden out of Mizzou. If Luther Burden falls to the Kansas City Chiefs, I think it would be an absolute home run selection. 6 foot tall, 206 pounds, 8.5-inch hands, which is curiously small, but he ran that 4.41 40-yard dash, which I thought, honestly, I thought he was a 4.5 guy. 4.5, 4.55, somewhere in there, but he is a 4.41 guy, almost broke into the 4.3s with a 1.54 10-yard split. That 40-yard dash is 81st percentile. That is his best measurable. But 6 feet tall is actually taller than he was listed in college. He was listed at 5'11", which is that's the first time I've ever seen this happen. This is the first time I've ever seen a player measure taller at the combine than he was listed in college. 206 pounds. This is a solid built wide receiver. I do believe that Luther Burden has number 1 wide receiver potential. He does remind me of Anquan Bolden. I don't know what it is about his game that reminds me of Anquan Bolden, but something about him takes me back to Anquan Bolden down there for the Cardinals. I think it's just the absolute toughness with which he plays. Now, when you're looking at wide receivers, he has a little bit of everything. He is a speed guy. He's very fast. He also has elusiveness. Very difficult to get your hands on Luther Burden, and he is a plus toughness guy. You don't want to start fights with Luther Burden. So maybe he's not a deep threat, but I think that he can certainly be a deep threat in the way that we started to see Rashee Rice last season developing into a deep threat before his injury. He is a hands catcher, maybe not the greatest catch radius, but he's a guy that hangs onto the ball. If you can get it there, he can catch it. And he can be a deep threat. He can be a screen king, and he can be anything in between. He is a versatile wide receiver. Probably, in my opinion, the reason that Luther Burden might be available at 31 overall is that he seemed to take a step back last season. I don't think that's true. Having watched that Missouri football team, I think really what happened there was not Luther Burden. I think what happened there was the quarterback. I think that Brady Cook was a very limited quarterback, which ironically, he might get himself drafted. I thought that he might play himself into draftability after his junior season. It looked to me like he took 2 steps backwards as a senior, and I thought that he was going to get a training camp call. I think Brady Cook might sneak into that 7th round because of his athletic numbers, which he does not show those on the field. So I don't know where they came from. I did not see Brady Cook jumping nearly 40 inches at the combine. Back to Luther Burden. If you have Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, and Luther Burden, that is an incredible 4 deep at wide receiver. Next year, you will lose Hollywood. I think if you have drafted Luther Burden, I think you absolutely lose Hollywood Brown. You will still have Rashee Rice for a season after this year. You will still have Xavier Worthy for 3 seasons after this year. But having Luther on the team this season gives you a year to develop him into what it is that you want him to do. And guys, that's a deadly 4 deep there. Looking at Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, and Luther Burden, you have 4 guys there who have number 1 wide receiver potential. And they can do everything. Really, if you're looking at what it is that Luther Burden's going to bring to the offense, Hollywood and Xavier Worthy are kind of similar guys. Luther Burden is erring towards Rashee Rice, but he's got a little bit of Xavier in him, right? So he does open things up. Now, on the negative side here, when you're looking at Luther Burden, he does have small hands, and that is always a question going into the NFL. Is he going to be able to catch the footballs thrown by someone with the cannon that Patrick Mahomes has? Brady Cook is not that guy. That's not the kind of passer that Brady Cook is. He does have kind of short arms, and he does have a questionable 10-yard split. But in my opinion, none of those things are the reason that he's here at 31. The reason he's here at 31 is because the Mizzou offense took a step back last year. These small hands, short arms, questionable 10, these are nitpicks. Those will not harm him in the NFL. Moving on to the second round, pick 63, Shamar Turner, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. 6'3", 290 pounds, 10 and a quarter inch hands, 33 and 5/8 inch arms, and a projected 4.8 40-yard dash. This is a big and versatile defensive lineman. This is a prototypical Steve Spagnuolo type defensive lineman. And if you're trying to figure out who it is that you're looking at, he's somewhere between George Karlaftis and Charles Omenihu. Now, he doesn't have the tools that Omenihu has, but his play style is somewhere in between there. And I think that this is a guy that would be very difficult to keep off of the field, even in his first season in Kansas City. Karlaftis is a better pass rusher than is Turner, and Chris Jones is a better pass rusher from the defensive tackle position, but Turner is a very complete defensive lineman. You can put him at edge in this defense. You can put him at defensive tackle in this defense. And I think that I think that part of the strategy behind where Spags' defense is best is when an offensive line is not able to look at the defensive lineman ahead of him and know that's the guy I'll be blocking. The versatility, the element of surprise for a Spagnuolo defensive line wreaks havoc on an offensive line all the live-long game. And if you keep Shamar Turner at 290, I think he gives you a lot of that versatility. Here's the thing, though. When you look at this guy, you look at his body type and you look at him move, he's 290 pounds now. I think this guy could easily get up to 315 pounds if the move is, hey, we want him as a defensive tackle. He is, when his legs, very large legs, fairly small weight, very small waist, I would say, for a defensive lineman, very small waist for a guy who weighs 290 pounds. You look at him and you almost think he looks like a guy that's 260. But if there's 290 pounds crammed onto that frame, there's room for another 25, and I don't think that he would be all that athletically harmed by it. So what are the cons with Shamar Turner? He has a very high floor, but he might have a very low ceiling. He might not ever be anything other than a rotational defensive lineman. I think he definitely has the potential to be a starter and to be a, maybe not a high-end starter, but a high-end contributor. I think that he could be one of the guys in your defense that ends up getting a disproportionate amount of the statistics, because I don't think offensive lines are going to focus on him, especially when you have Karlaftis and Chris Jones on the field at the same time. Another negative, you don't really see him get pushed back a lot, but he can get stonewalled. So there are times where he doesn't get a whole lot of penetration, especially against the run. So he's not jackknifing into the backfield. He's just making the tackle at the line of scrimmage. And if that happens at the college level, fairly regularly, then it is certainly a risk to happen at the NFL level. So I do think that the floor is high in that I think this is a guy who plays 6 seasons in the NFL without question. The ceiling, so the floor I think is high. He's a guy who plays 6 years in the NFL without question. The ceiling I think might be low, and that's because you look at him sometimes on film and he might not be as explosive against bigger names than he is against smaller teams, which can say a lot. Then we have a very interesting defensive tackle here. Norman-Lott, 6'2", 291 pounds, 10 3/4 inch hands, 33 3/4 inch arms, a 5.05 projected 40-yard dash. He did the vert at the combine, hit 31.5 inches. A 113-inch broad jump, which is 90th percentile, and then 19 reps on the bench press. He does not have particularly impressive numbers, with the exception of that one explosive number, the 113-inch broad jump. But when you look at him on the field, he is very explosive. Now, he played in the SEC. Colin Saunders did not. So the tape for Saunders was more difficult to evaluate than it will be for Norman-Lott. The interesting thing about it is that he might be the type of athlete that you thought you were getting when you drafted Colin Saunders. He has a strange explosiveness about him. He has a wiry, almost nervous type of twitch to him. Very, very interesting athlete in Norman-Lott, and he has the tape against the big boys. So I think, where are we at here? This is 66. I think that's probably about right. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people going in the third round like that, but I think that might be about right. He was a rotational, great first step. I skipped that on accident. Great first step for Norman-Lott, and if you can translate that first step into the NFL, that's production. That is production. He was a rotational guy in college, so he is a gamble, but he does have pretty extreme upside even as a rotational guy. Even if you're only playing Norman-Lott for 30 reps a game, guys, I think there could be value there even at 66 because he will be a plus in the pass rush department. This is a guy that is going to get after it in the NFL, and if you can pair that with Chris Jones, it could mean definitive problems for offenses. Among the cons, I don't know if he's an impact guy in the running game. I just didn't see it. And the second downside here, sometimes these guys never develop in the NFL. Colin Saunders never hit in the NFL. Was able to contribute, had some really freakish plays from time to time, but was never able to be an actual consistent impact on the football field, and that's why he is no longer in Kansas City. So that could be the future that awaits Norman-Lott. Now, this is where we get to something very interesting. Cameron Williams, offensive tackle out of Texas, played right tackle at Texas, 6'6", 317 pounds, 11 3/8-inch hands, 34.5-inch arms, supposedly runs a 5.4 40-yard dash. This is a massive, born offensive lineman. Very powerful. Will remind you of Trey Smith on the football field. I think his floor is elite offensive guard. but I really do think that there could be a good starting left tackle in his bones. He is down from nearly 370 pounds just a couple of seasons ago. That shows you he is serious and he is disciplined. Now, I'm going to jump forward a little bit here, but I think that I want to talk about this in context of the pros as well as the cons. He started this season with people saying he was one of the top 5 offensive tackles in the draft. And now there's people who think he's a guard. There are people who put him, I think the PFF guys, one of the PFF guys had him ranked 3rd at offensive tackle this previous summer. Now he's a 3rd rounder. I don't know what that is. I don't know why he has fallen so precipitously in his rankings. One of the things that I do when I use these simulators is that I try to take their rankings into consideration when I use the simulator, because otherwise if you're the only one drafting on the information you have, your draft can be very idiosyncratic with the rest of the picks, which means that, especially because I'm not presenting everyone else's picks, just the Chiefs, there can be weird things that go on. So I try to keep things in league with I think Cameron Williams is a first rounder, basically, is what I'm saying. Sometimes his feet are almost too active, like chopping, which sort of tells me that it's something he has to remind himself to do. He's coaching himself on the field. Make sure you chop your feet. Make sure you chop your feet. And you can see him go through that process, which kind of says to me that it's not the most natural thing for him. And when you're just, where is it? When you're just a couple of years away from being 370 and you're showing up at 317 pounds, maybe you had lazier feet at one point in time. If the Chiefs are able to draft Cameron Williams at 95, this is going to be a home run draft. Luther Burden and Cameron Williams in the same draft at any point, and I think that this is a home run draft for the Kansas City Chiefs. Shamar Turner and Omar Norman-Lott could be absolute wins at those draft positions, especially when you're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, who are having struggles on the defensive line and are signing sort of mid-rangers there. But again, Cameron Williams, in my opinion, has good starting left tackle potential in his NFL career. Will he be there as a rookie? Maybe not, but I think he could be there as a professional athlete. So I just, if Cameron Williams is there, that is amazing. Now, back to the same well. Jalen Rivers, offensive tackle out of Miami at pick 133. This is the 4th rounder for the Kansas City Chiefs. This makes a wide receiver, 2 defensive linemen, and 2 offensive linemen in this draft. I don't have any problem with that, and I don't think anyone else does either. There is one more defensive lineman on the draft board that the Chiefs will take, and then a couple of cornerbacks. That is about the most boring draft you could ask for. And I think Chiefs fans would be absolutely elated, and I think that it would shore up a lot of problems. Jalen Rivers, 6'6", 319 pounds, 10-inch hands, 34 7/8-inch arms, and 83.5-inch wingspan, which means that his shoulders are approximately 7.5 yards wide. 5'2", 9, 40-yard dash at the combine, a 108-inch broad jump, which is 79th percentile. He has I'll get to that in a second. He has a good kick step. He looks natural in his pass blocking sets. He has the potential, in my opinion, to be a starting left tackle in the NFL. I don't think it is immediate, but if you are getting potential starting left tackle guys in the 4th round, that is an upside worth the selection every time. He is a decent athlete as an offensive lineman. I don't. Okay, we'll just get into the negatives. He keeps his hands curiously wide when not engaged. Instead of this, which you see a lot of offensive linemen right here inside the box, A, because this is where you don't get called for holding, and B, because this is, if I grab your shoulder pads, I can steer you like a steering wheel, versus being out here, you move and it sends me off kilter. But he keeps his hands real wide, and then he comes in to engage. It's kind of strange. I don't think he offers any upside at interior offensive line. I don't think he has the bend, which is strange for a guy that's actually looks like a decent athlete. He has a decent but not elite anchor. So once he sits down in his pass block, if he finds himself up against guys with a second move, it might prove problematic for him. Now, while my draft position on Jalen Rivers is in line with PFF, my notes are counter to basically every note that I've seen on Jalen Rivers. So it might just be that I am absolutely wrong on this evaluation, but this is what I see with him, and I think that absolutely this is worth the 144th pick, especially if you have the chronic problems at offensive line that the Kansas City Chiefs have. Jumping forward to the 7th round, the Chiefs have 3 7th-rounders. Fadil Diggs out of Syracuse, and edge, 6'4", 257 pounds, 10 3/8-inch hands, 33 3/8-inch arms, a 4.57 40-yard dash, which says 97th percentile. I find that dubious. 30.5-inch vertical leap, and a 121-inch broad jump. He has some pretty solid measurables, does Diggs. He plays violently. More explosive than Mike Dana, less solid than George Karlaftis. Along the cons here, offers no upside on the interior. Obviously, he's a little bit of a lighter guy. Doesn't have, I think, the sturdiness to play on the inside. It is also, watching his game, easy to imagine him as just another guy who never materialized. Does not stand out very much. Makes the plays he's supposed to, so that might not translate to the NFL. And then we will end out the draft portion before we get to the UDFAs with 2 cornerbacks. One, Fintrell Cypress II, cornerback out of FSU, 6 foot tall, 188 pounds, 8.5-inch hands. Those are little hands. 4.40 40-yard dash, supposedly. A 37.5-inch vertical leap, supposedly in high school. This is a good upside late round cornerback that has Brett Veach written all over him. He is an aggressive corner who can turn and run, has cornerback 2 potential. I don't think he's there. I think that it's going to take some work and some coaching to get him there, but I think that he has cornerback 2 type potential, and at pick 251, that is worth it. His ceiling, is what I mean to say, is cornerback 2, never going to be your number 1 guy. Does not have the greatest ball awareness. Just doesn't. So you will be yelling at your TV screen, turn around, an awful lot. And he is not afraid to push the limits of the rules, but that's something that we have seen Brett Veach favor in cornerbacks in the past, especially these late round flyers. Absolutely loves sort of the guy who's going to be on the field and make the referee call it. That is something we have seen Brett Veach favor. At pick 257, Tommy Hill, cornerback out of Nebraska, 6 feet tall, 213 pounds, 9-inch hands, 32 7/8-inch arms, 4.55 supposed 40-yard dash. He has good size numbers, 6 foot, 213. Nothing wrong with those numbers. Big guy at cornerback, very hulking guy at cornerback. So hulking, in fact, he reminds me of Mike Edwards. He might be able to get to 220 pounds. When you look at him, he might be able to carry an extra 7 pounds or so on that frame. Now, cons, you might notice Mike Edwards is not a cornerback. Mike Edwards is a safety. I think Hill is likely a safety in the NFL, and he would be a core special teamer as well. And look, guys, if you're drafting somebody at 257, probably that's what you're looking at. He has change of direction skills, but he does not have wiggle. Now we get into the UDFA, guys. We've got 6 names that are coming in as undrafted rookie free agents. And this, guys, these might be more fun than the actual draft picks as far as this mock draft is concerned, starting with Raheem Sanders, the running back out of South Carolina, 6 feet tall, 217 pounds. Those dimensions sound fairly familiar for running backs. A 4.46 40-yard dash, 36.5-inch vertical leap. You're looking at where are we at here? A 1.55 10-yard split, and then the movement drills, not particularly impressive. His ceiling is Isaiah Pacheco, for better and for worse. When you watch him, he will remind you of Isaiah Pacheco, right down to the fact that he gives his offensive linemen kidney bruises because he absolutely refuses to run anywhere other than right into other human beings. I think that we do have a little bit more history of productivity in the college level than Pacheco had. Pacheco really struggled a little bit at Rutgers, and you have Sanders, who is able to once in a while break away, things like that. I think that they're very similar running backs, and if you're not looking to pay the running back that you drafted in the 7th round, which it's at some point you have to stop being able to pay players, right? It runs out eventually. The Chiefs have not gotten themselves into terrible condition with the cap yet, but I think it's likely they will. Running back was not something that I addressed in the actual draft part of this draft. Sanders might be able to use a year on the practice squad and then come in swinging for the fences for the Kansas City Chiefs as far as what it means to be a running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. Basically competing for the starting job. I think he could a year from now, depending on what the Chiefs have at the position. Maybe my favorite player of the UDFAs is Brew McCoy. 6'2", 209 pounds, 10-inch hands, 4.5 supposed 40-yard dash. Guys, that sounds about right to me. He was an underachiever, but golly, would this be a fun addition to this offense. He is a hands catcher if it's outside of his body, and he has a big catch radius. Ask defensive backs in the SEC. You don't tackle Brew McCoy. You just get him to stop running. This is a very, very dangerous middle of the field type receiver, in my opinion, at the NFL level. His ceiling to me is 2023 Juju Smith-Schuster. That was a 900-yard guy, right? So that's not bad. And I think it is likely he probably does fall through the draft. I think someone probably takes a waiver on him in the 7th round. But he could be had, I think. It's the potential is there that he falls through the draft. And if you find yourself as a UDFA at any position, what team better than the Kansas City Chiefs, who go to the playoffs, go to the Super Bowls, and play their UDFA? But if you find yourself as a UDFA wide receiver, why wouldn't you want to play with Patty Mahomes? The next name on this list, another wide receiver, Julian Fleming from Penn State. 6'2", 206 pounds, a 4.35 40-yard dash, at least that is what he is reputed to run, and he probably is around there. a 4.07 shuttle, which is a good number as well. That is apparently from his high school days. A 43.5-inch vertical as a high school athlete. If that is true, that is incredible. Maybe he improves on that at his pro day. Practice squad him for a year, and then you have a guy who can stretch the defense. I think that Julian Fleming is a guy who will be a better pro than college prospect. He actually has a pretty decent route tree. He's not just one of these fast guy route trees where he's running deep all the time. You can see him on film break off routes and get open that way. And those are guys that are sticky at the NFL level, and Patrick Mahomes can take advantage of it. If you are, look, here's what I basically did here. Threw everything at offensive line, defensive line, and wide receiver. And Trey Wedig, out of Indiana, another big offensive tackle, 6'7", 319 pounds, 10-inch hands, 33.5-inch arms. Ran a 5.22 40 at the pro day, a 4.9 shuttle at the pro day, not a great number. 31-inch vertical. That's a pretty decent number. 107-inch broad jump. He's a big guy. He's more offensive lineman than athlete. He does not have great feet. That said, all of that said, he has a higher upside than Mike Caliendo, and he might be better than Mike Caliendo right out of the box. Maybe he needs a year on the practice squad. You're going to see the Chiefs, especially if they draft two pretty good offensive tackles in this draft, have a numbers crunch at the position. So are you able to sneak him onto the practice squad? Do you have to cut him? Where are you able to put all of these bodies? But I do think that if you have the shot to get Trey Wedig, he is worth trying to develop for a year. You saw Mike Caliendo, maybe not in the greatest fashion, but you saw him play in the Super Bowl, and I think that Trey is a better offensive lineman than Mike Caliendo. Then you have Thor Griffith, all-name team defensive tackle out of Louisville, 6'2", 320 pounds, 4.95 projected 40-yard dash. His ceiling is Derek Noddy. His floor is not an NFL player. You roll the dice on this one. He's 6'2", 320. Is a run-stopping type defensive tackle. I don't think he offers you anything in the pass rush department. Maybe he is able to learn under Mike Pennell for a year and end up being your plus-sized defensive tackle heading forward. And then finally, Nate Matlack, edge out of Pittsburgh, 6'5", 245 pounds, 4.82 40-yard dash. This is a guy that you practice squad for a year and you see if you can get him up to 260 pounds. He has a good motor. He has a decent first step, and he is a plus tackler. He could be an NFL player. Not going to make any guarantees there, but he looks like a guy that could be a rotational guy, could be a special teams guy. Now, on a team level here, what we did was a wide receiver in the draft, 3 defensive linemen in the draft, 2 offensive linemen in the draft, and 2 late-round cornerbacks, basically that end up being a cornerback and probably a safety. The structure of this team is getting to the point that the lines have to improve, but once they do, if last year's offense had a top 8 in the NFL offensive line, I think they could have cakewalked through that Super Bowl. That sounds idiotic. I know that sounds idiotic because they lost in the fashion that they did. That game never gets away from them if they have a top 8 offensive line. At this point, taking Cameron Williams and Jalen Rivers, You add that to the absolute bevy of offensive linemen that the Kansas City Chiefs already have. They carried 10 through last season, traded away one of them this offseason, but everyone else is back. At least to the best that I can remember, everyone else is back. Adding 2 more to that, plus the free agent left tackle that you signed, you're going to get to a numbers crunch. This makes me believe that still it might be that Trey Smith is on the trade block for the Kansas City Chiefs. The defensive line, you took a defensive lineman, you took a defensive tackle, and an edge. So you have all 3 of these sort of positions that you run. You have guys that can play, you have one guy that can play everywhere. You have 2 guys that can play only their listed positions. And then the late round defensive backs that Brett Veach loves to throw in there. And then as the UDFAs, just a bunch of flyers that I think some of them could hit. Brew McCoy, Julian Fleming, Raheem Sanders, I think, is an NFL guy. He's going to be on an NFL roster. So a bunch of guys there that could slip through the draft to the Kansas City Chiefs. That is what I have for this 7-round mock draft for the Kansas City Chiefs. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.